So welcome to the walkthrough. It's the Edexcel Higher papers. This time we're looking at November 2017 series and we'll begin with the non-calc paper 1. So question 1, as bog standard as it comes, prime factors, split it however you want. You could do prime factor decomposition, dividing through and so on. It's entirely up to you. I'm bored with using 12, so I'm going to use 18 twos. And then I'll do a three-way split to speed the process up. 3 threes are 9 times 2. Doesn't ask for indexed form, all it asks for is product. So in any order, just list them as multiplications. Always worth double checking just to make sure it still makes 36. So an easy version of these set up and solves, but still worth doing the method that will always get you through even the harder questions. So we've got K, J, and M. As you can see, it doesn't matter about alphabetical order. K is 7 years older than J. So we start with J. K is 7 years older. Martha is twice as old as K. So we double everything, including the 7. The sum, add them all up, we get 4 x's and 21 in numbers is 77. You've set it up, get it solved. So to find our x, take away 21 from both sides, divide both sides by 4, halve it and halve it. There we go for 14. Number 3, one of them where I'm going to say, if you want me to write them all out in terms of giving a reason, I've already done that. Do check out my worked answers on the Edexcel past paper homepage. Here I'll just talk you through them. So firstly, that angle is also 35. Opposite angles are equal. And then look at the parallelogram. You're not told that for fun. So if that angle is 75, so is that. That means you've got angles in a triangle. So you do 180, take away 75, take away 35. And hey presto, you'll get your 70. A nice early stages proof sort of question, really, angle reasoning. Number 4, you could make this hard, but it's actually not that tricky. I would simply go, we've got small. Look at the small circle. Circles are pi times the radius squared. So the small circle is pi times 4 squared. The medium-sized circle, the radius is 7. So that's 49 pi. And the large circle, it has a radius of 10. 10 squared means the area is 100 pi. It says, Daisy says exactly, there's the hint that Daisy's wrong. A third is shaded. So let's look at how much is shaded. So shaded is the medium-sized circle minus the small circle. That means 33 pi centimeters squared is shaded. So what fraction of the entire shape is shaded? That's 33 pi. Out of the whole lot, that's 100 pi. They cancel. So is Daisy correct? No, she isn't. And the reason is, although they look similar, 33 hundredths and 1/3, they are not the same fraction. One's 0.3 recurring, which you could do to decimals if you want. That's 0.3 recurring, that's 0.33. Close, but certainly not the same. Number 5, estimating the mean. Usually a calculator question, but not. when the numbers are this friendly. So just because you haven't got a calculator doesn't mean you don't go for the exact same method. You want your midpoints. Call them what you want, X, MP, whatever you want to call them, I don't care. But they are nicely, evenly spaced in this question. And you multiply them in turn by the frequencies. 11 threes are 33. 5 fours are 20. Don't get caught out, we're timesing by 0, so it's naught. And 3 600s. And column addition, mental arithmetic, however you find your total, it is 7,300, and you've got to divide it by 20 people. Or in other words, do 730 divided by 2. Mentally or bus stop, no one cares, as long as you get 365. Nadia says the mean may not be the best average. Do I agree? Definitely yes. You must justify your answer. Well, because you've got a zero, you've got a gap. So there are these 3 people on a much higher earnings than the other sort of 16, 17 people. So I would put forward the argument, yes, because the highest 3 earners are outliers, or the highest 3 earners affect the mean significantly. Any words to that effect? But as always with these 1 markers, don't overcomplicate. Don't feel like you've got to fill the whole lot of space. Number 6, yet another set up and solve. The key spot is not forgetting that being told it's a rectangle is more important than it seems, because what do you know about a rectangle? You know that opposite sides are equal. You can make the statement 5x minus 9 and 2x plus 6 must be equal. So we can take 2x from both sides, adding 9 to both sides. We get that x is 5. Don't forget, though, you haven't finished. Because if x is 5, whether you go for the left or the right, if you sub it in, you're going to get 16, as you should for both sides. So it says show that y is 3. So how do we show that? I would simply say area equals length times width. 48 equals 16 times y. So y is 48 divided by 16. Show means do, and unfortunately for show questions, you normally have, because you've been given the right answer, so you aren't getting a mark for the answer, you're getting a mark for the method. So the usual rule of thumb is write a line or 2 more than you would normally for a find question. Number 7, can't bother writing anything. What's one thing wrong? What's Brogan done wrong? They've used a ruler. All right, so I would put forward the argument, should have drawn a smooth curve or a freehand curve, or words to that effect. Number 8, write them in order of size. So Wellworth, just making a note, what does 2, 4, 6 recurring means? It means that after the 2, 4, 6, it'll go 4, 6. Here, it means it'll go 6, 6 forever. Here, it means it'll go 2, 4, 6 forever. And here, nothing. There's zeros forever. So the 2, 4, 6 is identical in all of them. It's all about what comes at the 4th decimal place. The 4th decimal place for that number is a 0. The 4th decimal place for this number is a 2. The 4th decimal place for this number is a 4. And the 4th decimal place for this number, it goes on, for this number, 0.246. Recurring means the 6 goes on forever. The 6 is in the 4th decimal place. Number 9. I feel this is a weird one, but it is what it is. Definitely well worth DSTing it. 2.5 hours. I'm never a fan. I much prefer decimals, particularly on paper 1, non-calc. So I would start with, what does James do? So James is going 50 kilometers. James took 2.5 hours to cycle that. So let's find James's speed. He's doing 50 kilometers in 2.5 hours. He's doing 20 kilometers per hour. It says Peter catches up with James when they'd cycled 15. So let's stick with James. How long does James take to travel 15? So we do 15 distance divided by speed. Nope. Speed is 20. We've just found that out, Al. So that's 3/4 of an hour. Or in other words, 45 minutes. So James is cycling for 45 minutes. Peter starts cycling 5 minutes after. So Peter, take that 5 minutes away, he's cycling for 40 minutes. Again, I'm not a fan in minutes when it's kilometers per hour. I'm going to change 40 minutes to 2/3 of an hour. Now, Peter also cycles that 15 kilometers, except he does it in 40 minutes. Now, it says work out Peter's speed. So Peter's speed will be this distance of 15 kilometers divided by, and this is why I don't like the 40, because dividing by 2/3 seems pretty tricky on a non-calc paper, but don't forget your fractions knowledge. Dividing by 2/3 is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. 15 threes is 45 on top, and 45 halved means he's travelling at 22.5 kilometers per hour. Number 10. So power of a half means square root. So you could write 10. If you're going to go on to A level, get into the habit of writing plus and minus 10. Part B, I always say, don't forget that the top number, the numerator makes it bigger, the denominator makes it smaller, becomes the root. Don't fancy doing 125 squared without a calc, so cube root it first to get 5, and 5 squared, 25. Number 11, it's simultaneous equations. You could call it hidden algebra, but I think it's pretty obvious looking algebra. So top line, don't do it by trial and error. You might get the answer straight away, but that's not revision. 3 teas and 2 coffees, £7.80. 5 teas and 4 coffees, £14.20. Definitely easiest to make the coffees the same and not turn the teas into 15. So I will take the top equation. Let's double everything. So 6 teas and 4 coffees would be £15.60. Now when we look at the bottom 2 equations, I'm going to subtract because the 4 coffees have the same sign. And as you'll have been nagged, same sign, subtract. Bottom take away top means that 1 tea is 1.4. In other words, £1.40. So find the cost of a coffee by using either of your equations from the top. I always go with the smallest numbers, so let's go with the top equation. So 3 teas would be £4.20, and 2 coffees will cost £7.80. take away £4.20 from both sides, £3.60. So the cost of one coffee, half of £3.60, £1.80. Make sure you put your zeros on your answers. Don't want to lose confidence from the examiner. This one, I've drawn it properly on my worked answers again. Just going to go through where all the numbers come from. You're told your least height, 154. Get your line in. You're told your median, so that's straightforward enough. Get your line in. The lower quartile at 161. So all that info, fine. But then you're told the IQR is 7. You want the upper quartile. So 161 plus 7 gives you 168. And the least is 154. Add on 20, 174 would be your highest. Do use a ruler, but obviously you don't want to watch me. It's going to look like that. So again, I've drawn it properly on my worked answers. I've also written out my answers to part B on my worked answers. Again here, I'll just talk you through them. When it's worth 2 marks, do make sure you say 2 things and not repeat yourself. So don't mention for your first sentence the IQR and for your second sentence the range. You need 1 comment comparing the medians. So basically say, on average, year 11s are taller. All right. Words to that effect will be fine. You could even argue that the median 165 is higher than this median 157.5. But 1 statement comparing the medians for a mark. Then you need a statement comparing the spread, whether it's IQR, range, or both. But I would simply go with a statement of the year 7s are more varied. There's more range, there's more interquartile range. You could compare numbers. The IQR of the year 11s is 7. The interquartile range there is 10.5. The range for the year 7s is 24.5. For the year 11s, it's just 20. So usually easier to get numbers into your argument, certainly worth it, but yet again, when it's only worth 2 marks, don't overcomplicate. I would stick with, on average, year 11 girls are taller. The median of 165 is greater than 157.5, and I just put year 7 girls are more varied and compare either the range or the interquartile range numbers. Number 13, what a strange question. Not a fan of this one at all. It tells you about the proportion. The proportion means you could go about it the ratio way, you could go about it the fraction way. I think all being said, the fraction way is the better way. Hopefully you'll have a read of it in your own time. I'm not reading it again. I've read it a couple of times when I've done it the first time through. It says work out the total number of chicken pies made on a Monday. So we know that 450 pies are being made, sample of 15 and 4. So 4/15 out of the sample, and that's it. Top times top, bottom times bottom, but I would do pre-cancelling. Divide by 15, and so you end up with 120 on top over 1. All right, so very complicated just to say we've took a sample, 4/15 are chicken, so 4/15 of 450. There you go. Also weird on this one, on Tuesday, yada yada yada, his sample is 6, correct to the nearest whole number, work out the lower bound. So again, stick with proportion for me and write them as fractions. So lower bound, 6 correct, so the upper bound you'd go for 6.5. So lower bound, 5.5 out of his sample of 15 are the same proportion as the number of steak pies out of his 450, which, as you could see, could be quite tricky if you didn't know, about cancelling, but times both sides by 15 and times both sides by 450, but things again cancel. Divide by 15, divide 450 by 15. To find x, you just need to work out 30 times 5.5. 3 times 5.5 is 16.5. So it's 165. It says work out the lower bound of the probability out of the 450. Doesn't say you have to cancel it down. Don't waste your time. Number 14. These are very common, these questions. Get used to them. They're not as hard as they do look. If you're given, let's just think of it in simpleton terms. If the ratio of 3 to 4 is equivalent to 6 to 8, why is that? It's because we can say that 3/4 and 6/8 are the same fraction. They're in the same proportion. There is a multiplier to get from one to the other, and it's the same either way, either ratio you're looking at. So we can say, looking at this weird ratio, that the first thing divided by the second thing is equal to this ratio, the first thing divided by the second thing. When you divide by 1, who cares? So basically, it starts looking like a ratio question, but it's really saying to you, change the subject. It's a transposition of formula question. So times both sides by y minus x. Expand the brackets. ky minus kx. As you can see, it wants the y isolated, so let's change it so we get y's. Let's isolate the y's on one side. It wants k minus 1. Okay, so if you think about it, it means there must have been y k minus 1. Where are we going to get that? We want yk to be positive. So I'm going to keep the ky over here. So I'm going to add kx to both sides and subtract y from both sides. Isolate your y even further by factorising. So y, take it out, we've got the k minus 1, and there you can see we're home and dry, because I've run out of space, but divide both sides by k minus 1, while also on the top take out an x. As I say, I've run out of space because I'm writing with something that's equivalent to a jumbo crayon, but there you go. That's how you go about number 14. Number 15, as they always come up. You know they're coming. So my method always is, make sure you've got your recurring right up to the decimal point. And to do that, you need to budge them up one decimal place. So now they are appearing straight after the decimal point. We want that to happen again. We want it to be 3, 6 recurring again. To do that, we need these to have budged up. And the only way to budge them up is to times both sides by 100. And now you can do your giant takeaway. 990x is 432. And now you can proceed to cancel down because x is going to be 432 over 990. You know it cancels down to there. Might be worth showing a few extra steps, as in cancelling down by halving. and then dividing everything through by 9, I believe it is. They're both in the 9 times table. Divide that by 9, you know what you get. You don't have to overcomplicate that last bit. You've shown all the steps. Prove algebraically. This is the bit the examiners want to see, and that bit, after that, they're not that bothered, to be honest. Number 16, very standard proportion question. Always the same for these, whether there's 1 or 2 proportionalities. Y is, don't bother with that fish symbol nonsense. Y is something multiplied by whatever they tell you. Y is 1 1/6. Don't like mixed fractions. When x is 8, well, the cube root of 8 is 2. And there we go. We've got k. Divide both sides by 2. Best way to divide a fraction is double the bottom. So you've got your value for k, which means you've got your formula. Y is equal to 7/12 of the cube root of x. And we've now got numbers to stick in. So y is 7/12 multiplied by the cube root of x, 4. Top times top, bottom times bottom. Cancel it down however the heck you want. I'll leave it as a top-heavy fraction, divide top and bottom by 4. Obviously that's 2 1/3, but there you go. Number 17, prove algebraically. What that really means is times these brackets out and hope loads of stuff simplifies. So do it. It says sum, so you need to add 2 things together. So expand the brackets. Half n times n is a half n squared. Half n times 1 is a half n. Here, you've got a quadratic to expand, so I'll expand it and then halve everything as I go along. So n times n, halved. 1 times 2 is 2, halved. Then the middles, 1n, 2n, so I've got 3n, halved. Let's look at what cancels and what simplifies and all that. Well, you've got a half n squared, half n squared. That's a whole n squared. You've got a half of n, 3 halves of n. You've got 2n. You've got a plus 1 on the end. Square number, where's that going to come from? Get it factorised. And there you go. Whatever n is, you add 1 to it and you square it. That will always be a square number. It's only worth 2 marks. So don't overcomplicate on the algebra. Don't over waffle on your last line. Just simply put, n plus 1 squared is always a square number. That's it done. It's only worth 2 marks. Don't overcomplicate. Number 18, as you can see, I've slightly penciled it out. It's one of them where you can think you're wrong. I do prefer to do enlargements by counting first. So the way I would do it is it wants you to use the centre of 0. Do it by counting. So count 2 to the right, 3 up. Times everything by -1/2. So that becomes left 1, 1.5 down. And do it as a posh dot to dot. The reason why I prefer to do enlargements by counting is I can then use the raise method to check that everything lines up. So that top vertex there now becomes the bottom vertex. That vertex there. They all line up. I'm confident I'm right. And that's helpful on this one, because with all these 0.5 coordinates, it is possible to think you're doing it wrong. It's very easy to think, don't normally see them, because you don't. You don't normally see them with all these 0.5s, but it does happen, and the rays confirm it. Number 19, not as bad as you think. Weirdly, this little bit here is underrated. Here's why. So you've got this equation. If we make it y equals, we have to take away x from both sides and then halve both sides equal, and we've got a 6 on the end. Now that's not just important for finding the gradient, it tells us this coordinate here. It tells us that E is the coordinate 0, 6. Now the reason why that's important is because we actually already know this coordinate. This is the x-axis. That's where y equals 0. If y equals 0, then x must be 12. And that's a clever statement because we can now refer to this. A to E is the same as E to B. Or to flip it around, travelling from B to E is the same as travelling from E to A. So by knowing these two bits of info, we know where A is. We go from B, we go left 12 up 6. So we go left 12 again and up 6 from 6. So we know the coordinate of the point of intersection. But also, we know its gradient. So it says find an equation for m. Well, the gradient, negative reciprocal, they are perpendicular. All right, you're told it's a rectangle, has to be 90. So negative reciprocal, flip it and change the sign. The gradient is 2. We know the coordinate it goes through. So you could use y minus y1 equals m into x minus x1. I'm going to go for this one, the y equals mx plus c version. So we know what the coordinate of y is. Y equals m times x, that's 2 times negative 12 plus c. In other words, we know the intercept. C is 36. As can be confirmed by, as you can see, shoots off to a very high positive number. So we know what the intercept is, we know what the gradient is, so we know what the equation of the line is. But as I say, it's all in that little, innocuous looking sentence there. On we go. Number 20, you could overcomplicate this one as much as you want. Let's just remind you, I'll rub it out in a sec. Let's look at the cos curve. The cos of 0 is 1. That tells you something really nice, but also the cos of 90 is nothing. So a lot of this information is more than you actually need. This is a good one to choose. I'm going to sub in, replace y with 3. A, don't know what that is yet. Cos x is cos 0 plus b. As we know, the cos of 0 is 1. So we get this nice looking question here. The next thing I would look at is this one here, as I've already mentioned on the cos curve. Let's stick them in. So y is 1 equals a lots of cos x, that's cos 90, plus b. And there's your key. Cos of 90, feel free to stick it in your calc after this, but in the exam it's non-calc, so you couldn't. It's that knowledge that the cos of 90 is 0. It disappears, you know your b. And if you know your B, you know your A. So you've got your A, you've got your B. Find the value of y when x is 45. Y equals A cos x. We know what A is. 2. We've got the cos of 45. And we've got a plus 1 on the end. And this is where you need your non-calc trig knowledge, because the cos of 45 is root 2 over 2. And yet, those 2's cancel. And your answer is the root of 2 plus 1. Job done. Strange question there, but it is basically your trig values, but a little bit of simultaneous equations. Not the hardest simultaneous equations, but it is more to do with knowledge of your sine and cos and your non-calc trig values. So when you revise your trig values, don't just revise sin, cos and tan of 30, 45 and 60. Do remember to revise your zeros and your 90s, and if you can, beyond that. Number 21. Posh way of saying rationalise. So root 8, you could do it now or later. Root 8 can be simplified. I'll do it later. If you want to rationalise, you multiply top and bottom by changing the sign. On the top, 6 lots of root 2, 6 lots of 1, minus root 8, root 2, they multiplied is root 16. You could obviously write minus 4 there. And then we've got minus, well, root 8 times 1 is root 8. But as I said, don't forget, root 8 is root 4 root 2. Or in other words, 2 root 2. And on the bottom, only need to do root 2 times root 2 and minus 1 times 1. Oh, look what happens on the bottom. Typical non-calc stuff. 2 minus 1 is 1. We can ignore it. Dividing anything by 1, who cares? So let's just simplify it once it's in this particular form. So we've got a 6, take away a root 16, so 6 take away 4 is 2. 6 root 2 minus 2 root 2, we get 4 root 2. Job done. Number 22. What a strange question. One answer is easy, getting the second answer not so easy. I'll do my best to explain. So first of all, let's get the easy answer. This distance here is 15. So you need a scale factor. What do I multiply 12 by to get to 15? Well, you divide by itself and you times by the top, times by what you want. So your multiplier is 15 twelfths. In other words, could divide top and bottom by 3, and you've got 5 over 4. Doesn't matter, all right, as long as you realise that's your multiplier. So let's create a bit of room because the explanation for the second part. So once you know that, the fact that they are similar and you've now got a multiplier means you can take the other side, 8, and apply the same multiplier. As I said, 15 over 12 or 5 over 4 if you wanted to. But top times top is 120 over 12. So the whole distance there is 10. Whoops. Which means that x is 2. I'll write it up here and get it out of the way, because like I said, that's the easy bit. X is 2. That's the easy bit. But because I'm writing in a jumbo crayon, this electronic pen, Let's now move on. We've banked the easy part. Let's now try and explain. There are two possible values of x. What the heck is it on about? This is it. You've still got the line A to C. Okay. Now, the idea being, you've still got the line A to D. But we're going to flip the B and the E, because similar does mean you can cut it out of paper, flip it around, flip it over, and so on. It doesn't say congruent. It's not an angle side angle question. You could flip it over and change it and muck around with it, basically. We're told they are similar. Okay, so let's flip around the B to be there. That means that's 8. And the original was 15. So A to D is fixed at 15. It's not like X where it's got two values and can be longer. So the idea is that's got to be 7. The whole line A to D has to be 15. Now if we flip it around, that has now become E. Let's put the third side on. Now when we flipped it around, that distance A to E is fixed at 12. Now what we have done, by changing the 8 to a 12, we've made this distance longer by 4. So we need to replace it with x minus 4. Okay? But now you can go down the same route. A multiplier. How do I turn 8 into 15? You must be multiplying by 15 eighths. So you have to multiply 12 by 15 eighths. Let's do a bit of pre-cancelling. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. Top times top is 45. Divided by 2 means we've got 22.5 for the entire distance A to C. But we know that A to E is 12, so we need to take 12 away. But don't forget, that's giving us the distance E to C. So 22.5 minus 12 is 10.5, but then add on the 4, we get 14.5. Tracking question. I think a very tough question to get that extra value of x. You can do it by another way of going about it is to do the old proportionality and say things like 8 over 15 equals 12 over x minus 4, and you could do it a much more algebraic way. Very tricky question, in my opinion. One of those that looks simple, but I don't think it is very simple. I think 23 is simpler. Got to be honest. Pretty bog standard for a question to finish off. So, you're told the rectangle is greater. You're told area. Let's just crack on with finding areas. Area of a rectangle is length times width. And we're told it's greater. Area of a right angle triangle is a half base times height. Right hand side's nice, they cancel. We've just got an x squared. Left hand side, we also need to multiply out. So 3x squared. Use loops, however the heck you normally do it. I'm just going to speed the process up because I have already done it. 5x plus 2. But we need to make it equal. Sorry, we need to make the right-hand side make 0. I'm not going to use the word equal. By subtracting x squared from both sides. We now need to factorise. Use the AC method or trial and error. It's quite an easy factorising because it's prime numbers all over the place. So it has to begin with an x and an x. It must finish with a -1 and a -2, but it has to be this way around to get the -5x. So there are two critical values here. Now, if you look at this first one, x equals a half. That causes you a problem. X equals a half. Look at this side. All right, you have to reject it because you can't have a negative length for a side. You can have a negative number, but you can't have a negative length for the size of a side of a rectangle. So however you get around that, you must reject the answer. So the only other alternative is in there. So x has to be greater than 2. All right, if you wanted to check if you've got a sine diagram etched into your brain, there's your half, there's your 2, but that gets rejected. It's still the same thing, but I think a much more bog standard finishing to a paper than it was. I think question 22 is much harder to get full marks on than question 23, but you don't always get the hardest question right at the end. Right, folks, I hope that's helped with that paper one. I'll see you on the next one.